thinking of moving to Arizona, but a little bit scared off about what to expect during the summer monsoon season. In this video today, I'm going to give you everything I know about the monsoon season based on me living in Arizona for the last 55 years, and also research from what I'm seeing out of the National Weather Service on what to expect for the 2025 monsoon, which is going to be upon us in the next couple of weeks. My name is Dawn Dickinson, and the channel is Living in Northern Arizona, where I'll teach you everything there is to know about living in the state of Arizona. I am a licensed real estate agent, so if you ever have a question about buying or selling a home in Arizona, my contact information is always in the description below, and if you reach out with me, phone call, email, or a text, I will get back to you. So in Arizona, the monsoon season officially kicks off on June 15th and runs through about late September every year, and typically is where we see most of the rainfall for the state. Typically in the monsoon season, anywhere in Arizona, you'll get from 30 to 60% of the total annual rainfall in that time period. So it is something to be concerned about, but it's not going to be terribly dangerous or life-threatening unless you do some of the risky behaviors that people do sometimes during the season, which I will get to later in the video. I'm going to talk about two parts of the states. Typically, Tucson and Phoenix is going to be the dry desert that I'm going to talk about, and then Northern Arizona is going to be anything above, say, Black Canyon City. So Yavapai County, Coconino County, and the northern part of the state, Flagstaff area, you're going to have different experiences during monsoon. Of course, it's going to be the rainy season in both parts of the state, but because in the Phoenix area, you're typically seeing about 7-8 inches of rain for the entire year, and in the northern part where I am in Sedona and also Flagstaff, going to have about 21-22 annual inches of rainfall every year. So it's going to be impacting the different parts of the state a little bit differently, but it will still be the same. It's still the rainy season. We're still going to be getting 30% of the annual rainfall, and as much as 60% of our annual rainfall going to be falling in those 3 or 4 months starting in June and ending in September. Now, in previous years, there were a whole bunch of conditions which they would signal the start of the monsoon, which would be dew point and a few others, and then at some point about 5 years ago, they just said, hey, let's just start it on June 15th, and that's where it has been the last 4 or 5 years or so. But typically in the low deserts, in say Phoenix, Tucson area, during monsoon, you're going to get about 2.5 inches of rain, and in the northern part of the state, Sedona, Flagstaff, Williams, you're going to get 7-8 inches of rain. It's 2.45 inches of rain typically in Phoenix, and about 7.63 inches of rain in Flagstaff. What could you expect during the monsoon season? Well, there are a few things you're going to see. You're going to have rain, higher than normal amounts of rain, and when rain comes down, it's typically in the afternoons during monsoon, and all the last couple of days we've been getting them overnight. I'll go into that. Typically you're going to see rain, and rain can fall very heavy for a short amount of time, and then it will clear out. You could get hail, you could get wind, lightning. Now, they say in Arizona about 500,000 lightning strikes will happen during the year. Blowing dust, you hear about the haboobs. Often these haboobs, dust storms, make national attention. Sometimes you've seen pictures of haboobs in Saudi Arabia area, but you do get similar things happening in Arizona as well because of the desert. I don't see many of the haboobs. In fact, I don't know if I've ever noticed a haboob or a dust storm in the northern Arizona when I've lived in northern Arizona, but I did see that a lot when I lived in Phoenix. Especially, it was more prevalent in the 1970s, it seems, but you still do have that. Flooding and also flash floods, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Officially, monsoon doesn't start until June 15th, but this year we had rain on June 1st, which actually hasn't happened in Phoenix in the last 111 years. So we did have rain on June 1st in Phoenix. Now, I actually was in Phoenix on June 1st, and it did rain, and I came home to Sedona on June 2nd, and I had rain also on June 2nd and yesterday, June 3rd. So getting a little bit early start. Now, there was an old saying, wives' tale, that sometimes you hear, rain in June, no monsoon. which was the case last year. I remember we got a couple of rainstorms that were early last year in June. I'm like, is the rain and soon no monsoon going to hold? And it did. We had a very dry season last year. I will have some totals for you at the end, but this year could be different because the National Weather Service is projecting that we have a 33 to 50% likelihood of having a heavier than normal monsoon in 2025. Now, what this means in Phoenix is typically you've got 10 rainy days during the season where you will have a monsoon, but in the northern part of the state where I currently live, you can have 30 to 50 plus days of rain during the monsoon season. Now, one thing I want to let you know is a lot of people that are moving here, I am a real estate agent and I do get a lot of people relocating to Arizona. They're worried that their house is going to flood during monsoon. But if you are not in a flood zone, your chance of house flooding is actually kind of low. If you are in flood zone X or shaded zone X, you should be okay. Now, I'm not going to say you're always okay, but most of the time you are okay if you're not in a flood zone. If you're in flood zone A, AE, or some of those that have a chance of flooding from the FEMA designation, I could be a little bit worried. And if you're parts of Flagstaff that weren't ever flooding before, when we had the fires a couple of years ago, it took the vegetation out of the soil, so there are more areas in Flagstaff flooding now than there were a few years ago. But most of the time, if you're in flood zone X or shaded X, you're okay. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be concerned about what happens during the monsoon. So as we talked about earlier, typically in monsoon, you get 2 or 3 inches of rain in the desert and about 10 to 16 inches in the mountains. For 2025, they're saying we could have, National Weather Service is saying we could have an extra heavy monsoon, extra heavy rainfall this season from National Weather Service. However, I'm seeing some of the local weathermen in Phoenix saying that may not be true. We may just have a normal year this year. So hard to know what that means. They're also saying we could have higher than normal temperatures projected for 2025. So that's something to be concerned about. Really not such a big issue in the northern part of the state. But if you're in Phoenix or Tucson, you don't want to have higher than normal temperatures. And again, I'm not seeing that from the meteorologists in Phoenix, but from the National Weather Service where they're looking at the country in general. I did hear them mention that. Now, I did get some rainfall totals from the Phoenix area from the last 5 years that can give you a little bit of an idea of what happens. It seems like the last 4 or 5 years we've had terrible monsoons. In 2020, Phoenix only had about 1 inch of rain reported during that time period. But in 2021, we had a great year. We had 4.2 inches of rain in the Phoenix area. I was living in Sedona at the time. It was great up here too. 2022 was somewhat normal with 2.23 inches of rain, but 2023, but a very low monsoon of 0.15, and in 2024, 0.74 inches of rain. Now, if we're going back the last 10 years, the heaviest years for monsoon were 2021, we had 4.2 inches. Phoenix, again, I'm only talking about Phoenix. 2015, there were 3.29 inches of rain, and then 2016, 17, 18, kind of normal at about 2.5 inches, and the same thing we had said about 2022 was 2.23 inches. So that's what has been going on the last 10 years. It does seem like we have had a lot of dud monsoon years, except for 2021 where they had 4.2 inches of rain. Now, I don't have the statistics broken out for the northern part of the state, a little bit harder to find up here because we're not as populated as Phoenix. Now, what does all this information mean to you if you're moving to Arizona? Well, of course, it's going to be a little bit different if you're moving to the Phoenix area or Tucson compared to northern Arizona. But the most important thing to know is to just be careful while you're driving. So one thing I've noticed in Phoenix, I lived in Phoenix for like 50 years, so I know a lot about it, is because Phoenix has such low rainfall. You know how when you drive, sometimes little oil drips out of the cars, right? So the oil in Phoenix will be on the roads and it's dry all year, and then suddenly it rains, so the roads get very slick, especially if it hadn't rained for a while. So you've got to be very careful in Phoenix. The road could be more slippery than you are anticipated. I mean, this could happen up in the north too, but just definitely slow down. Don't tailgate people in front of you, and just be aware if you're driving while it's raining, especially during the heavy rain. A lot of times you also haven't changed your windshield wipers for a long time, and then you'll put on the windshield wipers and you can barely see. Those are things that happen. The other thing is, the most important thing is not to cross with your car a flowing wash. Every year somebody will think, I can make it, and they'll cross the wash and their car will wash away and people get killed. Every year in monsoon season, people get killed from crossing a wash or a little creek that they shouldn't do. If you get up to a wash and you see it's flowing heavy and you're not sure, you're better off to just not cross at all. What I will sometimes do is I will get out of the car and I will walk over and see the water line. If it's higher than this, I don't cross. So a couple of years ago, it was probably that heavy rain we had in 2021. I was out with my friend. My friend has a birthday in July, and she lives in Rimrock. And we were out in Cottonwood going to lunch. We went back to her house in Rimrock, kind of had a, birthday cake or whatever for a couple of hours. And I went to leave. Now, her house is kind of trapped by this big wash, and I go to leave and I'm like, whoa, the wash is flowing heavy. And I also see people waiting, should I cross? And on the other side, I see people waiting, should I cross? And I see a sheriff car, so I'm definitely not gonna cross. I wasn't gonna cross anyhow, right? Especially if there's a sheriff waiting on the other side, but this big old lifted pickup decides he's gonna cross, and he barrels across the wash. He did make it, but he had a big lifted pickup. And immediately as he gets to the other side, the sheriff pulls him over. Lights on, follows him, and I must have got some kind of ticket. Now, I just went back to my friend's house and said, hey, I can't cross the creek. And I waited a couple more hours before I went home. And then when I went and left the second time, which was probably like 5, 6 o'clock, the water had subsided. Now, what I could have done is there is a back way between Rimrock and Sedona. I could have taken the back road, but it's about 5, 6 miles of dirt road, and I had my car, I had the Infinity, and I didn't want to take the Infinity on a dirt road, especially because it had been raining the entire day. So I just waited it out. You're much better to wait it out. Would you rather wait it out a couple hours or wash your whole family downstream and all of you die? This happens every year. So you might think, oh, you're exaggerating. I am not exaggerating. Every year people get washed away. So that is the most important. If you get only one thing out of this video, just know, do not cross a wash or a creek where the water is flowing during monsoon. If you're any doubt, just wait it out. Now, a couple other things to notice is if the wind is blowing and there's a dust storm and you can't see when you're driving, it's good to pull way over on the side of the road and wait it out. And the other thing is, do not put your foot on the brake, because people behind you might see brake lights and think your car is going and crash into you from behind. So be very careful if it's blowing dust and you can't see, which is more likely happening in Phoenix. In fact, that road, Interstate 10 between Phoenix and Tucson, can get very dusty and windy during monsoon with these dust storms or haboobs. So again, if you're driving and your visibility is cut to very low, pull over and don't put your foot on the brake pedal. And one more thing not to do when you live in Arizona is during the monsoon season, I would avoid completely hiking in some of these box canyons or these creeks because of flash floods. Flash flood can happen when it's not raining. It can be 20, 30 miles north, and then you could get a flash flood and get wiped out. So I would not camp in a box canyon. I wouldn't even go hiking. Also, like the Oak Creek Canyon here in Sedona, a lot of people hike there. I have not heard of anybody getting washed away by a flash flood, but that is just the type of place that I personally would avoid camping or hiking during monsoon season. Now, another thing to do if you're a homeowner here, especially in northern Arizona, there are in front of everybody's houses, you got these little washes and stuff, and sometimes you'll have these little culverts. If you're a homeowner, make sure those culverts are cleared out. You don't want them to get weeds, and so that they're plugged up and they kind of dam up, because that's going to make a little bit of a problem in the washes down the stream. So just be careful. Also, we get a lot of lightning now. I have noticed since I live in Sedona, there are a lot of lightning storms. A lot of times there's no rain, but there'll be lightning. So just be careful walking around. You don't want to play golf. In fact, a lot of times in monsoon, I will hear what sounds like airy type sirens going off. What it is the golf course, if there's lightning in the area, will play the sirens to get the people off the golf course, because you don't want to be with a metal stick. You don't want to be out, where trees are, because you don't want to get hit by lightning. So those are just the kind of things to worry about. Now, if you were thinking of buying a home in Arizona, Most of the places in Phoenix are not in a flood zone, but here, if you're looking in Sedona, Verde Valley, Flagstaff area, Prescott area, definitely check and make sure the house is not in a flood zone. And if it is, you're probably going to want to get flood insurance, or you may be required to get flood insurance if you're getting a loan. So those are the type of things to worry about if you live here. Also in the north, a lot of us have rain gutters. Now I know my rain gutter gets clogged up with pine needles because I have a giant pine tree. So you want to make sure in the spring that you get all the rain gutters cleared out, you get the pine needles taken out or any type of debris out so that it will clearly flow. Now here's a risk if you don't have a rain gutter, or if your rain gutters are clogged. Sometimes the rain will now come down and it will kind of bounce back up if you've got a house with that like T111 siding. I think that's what it's called, the wood siding. It could eat away at that wood siding. Also not good for your foundation. So if you're in the north, I definitely recommend you getting rain gutters. So those are the types of precautions you have to take when you live in Arizona for the monsoon season. So that's about all I can think about. If I've missed something about monsoons, you want to leave it in comment, that would be great. And also if you're thinking of moving to Arizona from another state, might want to put that in a comment. I'm just curious where people are coming from. My name is Dawn Dickinson. Like I said, I am a licensed real estate agent in the state of Arizona. I am a full-time agent. That's all I do is I sell real estate, and I also make these YouTube videos to support my channel. So if you like the video, please do me a favor and consider hitting the thumbs up button, and also subscribe to the channel because I post videos like this every single week about living in northern Arizona, and this helps other people find this type of information. And I also hopefully will see you next week when I post a brand new video about living in northern Arizona.